Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. A couple of really dynamite presenters and important topics for us today. And to introduce the program, Thomas Cox, who coordinates our monthly programs and finds these great speakers, will introduce the speakers. Thomas, it's all yours.
Chuck, thank you so much. Thomas Cox here, event chair. And I'd love to take credit for the speakers, but in fact, the board has found both of these speakers, Rachel and Justin. Rachel's our first speaker. She'll be talking about selling internationally. Justin will come up after that to talk about his new book, his 12th, 13th book, RelationShift, and what we can learn about networking in new and better ways. But first, Rachel. So Rachel's been working on Capitol Hill on and about it as an intern and then as a trade specialist for the Commerce Department for, I think 5 years, 6 years, a good long time, good time on target. She's been a trade specialist now. And she's focusing these days on helping service organizations sell American services internationally. It's part of what the Commerce Department does in her particular niche in ITA. She'll tell you about that department here in a sec. We're very delighted to have Rachel here because she'll be telling us about the many different ways the U.S. Commerce Department seeks to level the playing field and actively encourage American service organizations to sell services internationally. I was shocked when I got my preview of her slides. I think you'll be delighted. Rachel Minogue, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my screen with everyone. If you could let me know once you see it, that would be great.
Looking good.
Wonderful. Great. Well, hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today speaking with all of you. My name is Rachel Minogue, and as Thomas mentioned, I'm an international trade specialist focused on professional services trade. I work at the International Trade Administration, which is a sub-agency of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And today I'd like to introduce ITA to you if you're not familiar with it already. I want to share a bit of knowledge on consulting services trade and some challenges that consultants might face overseas. I'll describe ways that ITA can assist U.S. consulting firms in their overseas activities, and I'll share a few additional resources as well. So first, ITA works to improve the global business environment for U.S. companies and help U.S. organizations compete at home and abroad. Our mission broadly is to strengthen the international competitiveness of U.S. industry, promote trade and investment, and ensure fair trade and compliance with enforcement of trade laws and agreements. We particularly aim to assist U.S. small and medium-sized companies in their international activities. We're organized into 3 business units: global markets, which has a regional and country focus; industry and analysis, which is comprised of industry specialists and economists; and enforcement and compliance, which focuses on trade laws. As the industry specialist for professional services, I work in industry and analysis. And I believe some of you are probably already familiar with the U.S. Commercial Service. The Commercial Service operates under global markets and is the primary trade promotion arm of ITA. So much of my job at ITA is analyzing data and trends in consulting services trade. As the largest exporters of professional and business services, U.S. consulting firms have a very strong international presence. Data shows that consulting services is an important sector for the U.S. in terms of trade. The U.S. is a global powerhouse in services overall, and the largest component of U.S. services exports is other business services, which includes consulting services. In essence, there are more U.S. exports of business services than any other services category, including financial services, travel, and transport. And then within other business services, consulting services is by far the most important contributing sector, reaching $68.5 billion in exports in 2020, which is the most recent data we have. This impressive value just captures a portion, too, of U.S. consulting services activities abroad, namely those provided cross-border, remotely, virtually, and those provided via temporary overseas travel. Unfortunately, the services that are supplied by affiliates of U.S. consulting firms overseas are not captured in this number. The U.S. has also maintained a consistent and strong trade surplus in consulting services over the past decade. And as you can see from the charts on the left, which show data on US consulting exports in 2020, European countries are the primary destinations for US exports of consulting services. Ireland, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands all attract a lot of attention from US consulting firms. Other important non-European markets include Canada, Singapore, Japan, and Brazil. My agency has expertise and specialists available to help you engage in all of these countries if you're interested, as well as critical emerging markets with growing demand for consulting services. ITA also pays close attention to problems US consulting firms may face overseas, and we try to dismantle or alleviate these problems where possible. Consulting firms may face a host of different trade barriers when selling their services overseas, including a few examples here: mandated affiliation with local firms, minimum requirements for local hiring, such as a certain percentage of a firm's employees must be local, restrictions on the type of incorporation or firm structure, restrictions on participation in government procurement tenders, residency or nationality requirements for consultants, restricted visa requirements that consultants may face, and professional registration requirements for consultants. As I previously stated, my agency seeks to support US businesses overseas via expert opportunities and the removal of trade barriers. As such, there's several different ways we can assist US consulting firms in their goals. First, my team can use important data points and trends to help identify potential markets for firms to consider. We can connect firms with specific opportunities abroad as they occur, such as government tenders seeking consulting expertise. We can help consulting firms to identify potential industry partners to collaborate with, and we can also promote US firms directly to potential clients in foreign countries. And we can use our network and connections to work to help consulting firms address market access barriers that prevent them from selling their services. We also have a huge team of country and regional experts in the commercial service, which are based in 100 US cities in over 75 countries. In the Pacific Northwest, we have teams in Seattle, Spokane, and Portland. These specialists work directly with US businesses every day, with a particular focus on small and medium-sized enterprises. And to add a bit more color on what we can do to assist, ITA offers a variety of services offerings to US companies. The first is initial market checks, which assess the market potential of a firm's service by gathering feedback from local industry experts abroad. An international partner search, which is a personalized search to identify potential industry partners in a specific country for a US firm. The Gold Key service, which is one of our flagship services, in which ITA arranges appointments with pre-screened prospective partners and clients in a foreign market. A single company promotion, where we organize a promotional event for a US company to increase the awareness of its product or service in a specific market. An international company profile provides a background report on a specific foreign company, such as a potential partner that a US firm is considering. There are trade shows, which allow firms to increase their market exposure at events overseas. And there are certified trade missions, which allow US firms to visit potential markets and explore business opportunities directly with potential clients. These are just some of our services, and there's more available that I can share on a link later. I do want to note that for these services, due to federal government rules requiring cost recovery, the US commercial service does charge a fee based on company size and the scope of work. I'd like to share some recent examples of ways we've assisted US services firms, several of which are ongoing now. So first, we're currently arranging a Gold Key service in Singapore for a US legal tech company. I met this company at a trade show this past March, and I've worked with them since to identify their goals and connect them with our commercial service office in New York. As part of this service, ITA is identifying, screening, and arranging meetings with 5 possible international partners for the company to meet with in Singapore. And the fee for the Gold Key service standard package for small companies is $950. For a different small consulting firm that's new to exporting, we're performing initial market checks in both Canada and Singapore. This firm reached out to me this past January, and in March, I shared some research on potential markets for their services. We've since held calls with my colleagues in Canada and Singapore to set up these services, which will take place in June. These initial market checks will analyze the potential for the firm's educational and training services to be successful in these countries. The fee for the initial market check for small companies is $350. And very recently, one of our trade specialists in Fiji shared an opportunity with a government tender for US consulting firms. The Fiji government is seeking a recruitment firm to assist with the selection of key senior officials, and ITA has promoted this opportunity to US consulting firms in its network. And sharing this information within our network does not entail a fee. And one recent example of past success, a small equipment manufacturer in Washington reached out to one of my colleagues in Seattle looking for partners in Europe. ITA organized meetings with European companies, and as a result, the Washington manufacturer signed a partnership agreement with a Hungarian distributor. This helped a company win a Hungarian public tender worth $500,000 and make a $40,000 sale to neighboring Romania. And here on this slide, I provided a few additional resources that may be of interest to you, and I'd also be happy to share these with anyone via email on request. First, our website has a contact us form if you'd like ITA's expertise in identifying potential markets or addressing trade barriers. This form is sent directly to my office, and a member of my team will follow back with more information on next steps. I've also shared a link with a complete overview of ITA services offerings for US firms, several of which I already outlined here. We have a homepage for information related to consulting services trade, and we also have 2 new reports that just came out in 2022. A report on overall trade in consulting services, and a market profile on consulting services specifically in Canada. And finally, for more information on trade barriers that you may face in specific countries, please consult the National Trade Estimate Report on Foreign Trade Barriers, which is an annual report published by my colleagues in the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. So thank you all for your time today and the opportunity to speak with you about what ITA can offer firms. My contact information is here. I'm eager to connect with all of you, and I'd be happy to discuss your exporting interests. I'd also like to note that I believe one of my colleagues from the Portland office, Haitham Shah, was planning to attend today. And if he is or not, he's still very happy to connect with anyone that is based in Oregon or Southwest Washington. I'd be happy to take any questions as time permits. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd love to have a copy of your PowerPoint, by the way.
Of course.
So
Absolutely.
I'll collect that from you and make sure that gets distributed. Super. Questions that folks have? I know I've got a bunch, but I don't want to dominate the room. If you can either type your question into chat or just speak up.
Would it be best for me to keep sharing my screen, or should I?
Oh, you can take
stop?
that down.
Okay.
And yeah, I definitely get the sense that there is quite the menu of things that we can take advantage of from your organization. And I'm hoping that it's unlike other US government agency websites in that this one I could navigate.
I hope so, and I would certainly appreciate feedback. I also work on the web design side for these pages. If there's ever anything confusing or ways we can improve it, please let me know. I'm more than happy to take that feedback.
That sounds terrific. And I think at least one person here in the group has actually been working with the Commerce Department with ITA in the past. Chuck, was that you or is it somebody else who had, or Andre?
I have used ITA and so has Andre, and it's a great resource, and I have done work overseas. And if I feel at sea, they're the first place I go to try to get some research information.
Brilliant.
And just a hint, in case any of you are not CMCs and want to do work overseas, particularly in Europe and Canada, it helps if you're a CMC. And in Canada, if you're not, forget it.
So we've got a couple of questions in chat. A good plug for the CMC, Charles. And so is there a way to share the Canada report that was just published? Maybe stick a link in chat if you have access to that.
Definitely.
Brilliant. And John, was there any follow-up on that request? Or is that good enough? Yeah, I can't hear you, John. Also, Andre said, in the case of one of his clients from South Carolina, they want to move into Europe and find a manufacturing partner. What would be the first step in your estimate for them?
So I would say the first step would be to connect with our U.S. Export Assistance Center in South Carolina, which I'd be happy to connect you with as well, if that would be helpful. You can also speak with our industry experts that are my colleagues just in different sectors. But I think in this case, working directly with our colleagues in South Carolina would probably be best. They would set up an initial call. They usually have a standard form they have people fill out just really to gain initial information about the company and what their goals are. They use that information to then determine potential markets in Europe in this case. And they would then connect that company and set up a call with our colleagues in our different Europe offices that they think might be interested. A lot of times there might be several offices contacted in Europe to say, is there a potential market for this? Is there opportunity here? And then whichever posts respond affirmatively, they will then set up calls with. And then they would discuss which of our services could be used to connect and find, and in this case, a manufacturing partner. And so that would kind of be the process. Sometimes we identify the services before connecting with the market overseas, but it just depends on the needs of the company. And I hope that answers your question.
Super. Andre's looking very pleased. I can see him taking busy notes there. Now, Justin asks, he's starting to hire contractors overseas to help support his clients. Are you someone who could help navigate possible issues with taxation or any other weird complexities that might pop up with that?
So that is a place we can start with, yes. And so much of the great part of us having experts overseas and offices based overseas is not only to connect with clients, but also to understand the environment on the ground. And so there's some potential research I might be able to do, but most of my research is pretty high level, really 30,000 foot, looking at data trends. And so if you're looking for more specific information on, specific taxation issues that could be a barrier, that's something where, depending on the country you're interested in, I can connect you with our post overseas, and they could potentially provide some research for you there. I had a call with a client or a company connecting with our Mexico City office. They were looking to try to do, the company was looking to connect with a Mexican government agency, and they weren't sure what hiccups they were going to face down the line. And our post in Mexico City provided a lot of excellent guidance on what they should expect for the process moving forward. So I think that can be something similar in other countries too.
Or specifically looking at the Philippines, is that one that you're in?
Yes. And
Okay.
I should add the countries that we're not in. I think we're in over 75 countries where we don't have a specific commercial service presence. We often work with our colleagues at the State Department that are based in embassies, and we call them partner posts. And so they receive some additional training on how to provide similar services to what our team would offer. And so I believe we have a presence in the Philippines, if I'm not mistaken, but if we don't, our colleagues at State have probably received some additional training on how they can help too.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Super. We're near the end of the Q&A time specifically for our first speaker. Thank you, Rachel, so much. And I hope you'll stick around so that at the end, after the second speaker and that person's QA, any additional pending questions that come up, we'd love to have you stick around and answer those.
Of course, I'll be here. Looking forward to it.
I find this very enlightened, and I'm glad we recorded this because I'm going to go back and watch it again. And now our second and longer speaker is Justin Blaney, Professor Justin Blaney, DM, best-selling author of a dozen books, including the forthcoming title to be released in September, RelationShift. His prior book, Will Post for Profit, How Brands and Influencers Are Cashing In on Social Media. He's a digital marketing expert, and over the last 20 years, Justin Blaney has driven $250 million in revenue growth for his clients. He's followed by more than 1 million people on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. He publishes an app that features his writing. My gosh, do I feel behind the times. Join me in welcoming Justin Blaney.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you. I happen to have a copy of my book right here. It's coming out in September. I've been working on this for about 6 years, actually, since I finished up my doctoral dissertation at the University of Maryland. So we have that in common, Rachel. And so I'm really happy to actually, this is the first time I've ever given a talk on the topic of relationships since I've been working on the book. I've been aware of the concepts for much of my life, and it started kind of coming together again as I was putting my dissertation together. So I have a little PowerPoint that I'm going to pull up here. Let me get that going. And I'm going to try to take you through the basics of what I call RelationShift. And I'm going to play this. So RelationShift is it's happening to us all the time. And really the basic idea of RelationShift is that we become like the people that we hang around. It's a really common principle that I think we all are well aware of. And what I realized as I studied this was that there's a lot more opportunity to make use of the principles of RelationShift than most of us take advantage of. And I found that if you become more conscious and aware of how you're using these principles, you can actually achieve almost any goal. You can really shape your life. You can become happier. You can get in shape. You can start a business. You know, whatever you dream of. In fact, even your dreams themselves can change, because everything that we are came from the people in our life. So that's what I want to dig into. The topic is RelationShift, and we'll get started. I'll start by telling you a little bit of story about how this all started. And it started when I was a kid. I was born the son of a drug dealer and con man in LA. And it was kind of a strange childhood. Maybe it sounds like to you, but to me it was normal. And, you know, like I'll give you one story. When it was time to go to the county fair, rather than going in the front entrance like most people, my dad waited till it was take your kid to work day, and he dressed up like a maintenance worker, faked a name badge, and we snuck in the back gate. So that's how we went to the county fair for the first time. You know, and the reason why I bring this up is that people have this question about, you know, how far the apple falls from the tree. You've heard the phrase, you know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And so some of us become a lot like our parents, and some of us become very different. But the fact is that effect that our parents have on us has a powerful magnitude to change us and make us who we are. But not just our parents, everybody in our life, our teachers, our pastors, our mentors, our friends. And so you say, well, why would one person become more like their parent? Maybe one person becomes different. And that's the magic and very interesting factor of RelationShift, is it's incredibly complicated. So it's not so easy as just to say that we become like the people, you know, the 5 people that we hang out with. There's a lot of phrases like that, like you're the average of the 5 people that you hang out with. It's much more complicated than that. Now, for me, the reason why I bring up my childhood, one reason is that when I was a kid, I never really understood a lot of things that it seemed like other kids understood about relationships. And it took me many decades of people kind of suggesting mildly, you know, maybe they were joking, maybe they were serious, that I could be on the spectrum for autism, and that I didn't really understand like basic things of the, you know, the way that people interacted. And so what I did was I studied how people interact, and I learned to adopt those traits. And sometimes I didn't even understand them even after I adopted them, but I just noticed that that's the way that people interact. So I moved through my life learning to behave normally, you know, what most people just learn naturally. I had to be more conscious about it, which is why I think this topic became of interest to me later in life, because I found myself emulating traits later in life. So I'll give you one example. One time I was sitting, I had met somebody at a party, and, you know, we kind of hit it off, and invited her out to drinks, and we were getting to know each other a little bit. And she said, kind of out of the blue, she's like, man, you know, at the party, you seem like such a fun, like nice, interesting guy, but in person, you're actually like incredibly serious. And I was kind of taken aback, because I thought we were having a good, fun conversation. But I realized that there was something about my facial expressions that was not conveying what I felt on the inside. And so I started looking around, and I noticed that people smile when other people are talking. And it's like a simple thing that a lot of people do naturally, but for me, it wasn't natural. So I started to try to smile a little bit more when I'm having a conversation with an employee or whatever. So it's this kind of emulation, that something that I've had to do somewhat more manually, other people do naturally. And that's what caused me to think about these things and spend so much time working on them. So fast forward. Oh, by the way, here's me getting relation shifted by my mom. Can see how pleased I am to have her rubbing off on me here and changing me a little bit. So there's me as a teenager. But in my dissertation, what I became really, really interested in was that ideas spread like viruses. So for me, I was purposefully trying to catch certain viruses, but this is how all ideas transfer from one person to another. In fact, you have to have proximity to someone. And for an idea to transfer, rather than just pure physical proximity, like we've discovered with social distancing and COVID and all of that, for ideas, you need trust. And that trust is what facilitates the virus of an idea to transfer from one person to another. Now, sometimes it can transfer without trust even, but trust definitely facilitates the transfer. And that's why the people who are closest to us have the most impact on us. But ideas spread like viruses, and you know, it might be better to use the term bacteria because there's actually good bacteria and bad bacteria. There's actually good viruses and bad viruses too. We think mostly that viruses are bad, but there are some good viruses that we've been discovering recently in the physical realm, in the space, like in our gut, that help keep us healthy. And so the ideas are the same way, right? Some ideas that we catch are good and healthy and helpful, and some ideas that we catch are harmful to us. And sometimes we can't tell the difference. And our bodies are basically have the same function. Our immune system is designed to reject negative bacteria or viruses that are going to hurt us. But sometimes it gets it wrong and it rejects a good thing. So I'll give you an example. When you get an organ transplant, sometimes you have to take medicine to reduce your immune system response because your immune system might think that that new organ is a danger. It doesn't recognize it, and so it wants to reject it. So we have to take a drug to reduce our immune system response. That's an example of how our body's immune system could reject a good idea. We do the same thing. One example with me is like, let's say with counseling. I used to, think counseling was a terrible idea. And why? Because I tried it once. I didn't really like the guy that I talked to. I didn't get anything from it. So I thought this is a waste of time. I don't see why anybody would ever do this. But I had lots of people say, hey, you should, get a counselor, check it out, try it out. So for years I didn't. Finally, I tried again and I found somebody that I really liked and we worked through some really cool stuff. And I was like, man, for 3 or 4 years, I was rejecting the idea that counseling could be helpful to me, just like my immune system rejects helpful ideas. We do the same thing, obviously, with some harmful ideas. When people are exposed from a young age to racism or, any kind of negative mentality, just negativity about life, if you're exposed to that again and again and again, people can catch that like a virus. And their immune system isn't necessarily always capable of rejecting that or understanding the difference between the good and the bad. So one of the key principles of making better use of RelationShift is learning to differentiate and learning to accept the good and helpful viruses or ideas from the people around us and reject the ones, even from the same people, that could actually be harmful. So RelationShift is happening to us all the time. It's happening to you and me right now. Literally, this is RelationShift. You all are listening to me describe my past and you're hearing my stories. And you have a personal lens, an immune system that's either accepting or rejecting those ideas. And that's your response based on all of the things that have happened to you up until this point. So, but I came to be really fascinated with this idea when I was doing my dissertation is, could we take better control of who we're becoming by being more intentional about how RelationShift is affecting us? And the answer is yes. You actually can take control of this process. It's going to happen to you whether you like it or not. You're going to continue to be affected by the ideas that you're bombarded with or the ideas that you're presented with. But the question is, can you take control of that and how? And that's what the topic of RelationShift, my book, is about. And that's what I want to get into with you today. Try to give you some practical examples of how you can make use of this concept to make some changes in your life. So RelationShift is like the game Plinko. Any of you guys ever remember that game from, it wasn't Price is Right, the game Price is Right. So here's a Plinko board. And in Plinko, what you do is you take this puck and you drop it down one of these slots, and your goal is to get it into the money slot in the bottom with the most money. And you think, you have like some control over this, but in reality, it doesn't really matter where you put it. You can't really control where it falls because it hits those pegs on the way down. And because of the randomness of our universe, it bounces one way or the other. And statistically, you could look at this and you could say, there's some math that we could do to kind of calculate the probability it's going to fall in any of these different places. But in real life, it's too complicated. And what's that like? It's like it's bumping up against different pegs or different people. And we like I described to my father, he was a con man and a gambler and a drug addict. And I didn't become like that. Why didn't I? Other people in my family did become like him and are like him. And so we bumped up against pegs over the course of our life. And for some reason, I kind of went one way and some of my siblings went another. And so life is kind of like that. But RelationShift is taking control of that. But how do you take control of that? Because it seems so random. Well, here's the analogy is, what if you could take that Plinko board and you could rotate it? So now as you're hitting those pegs, you're kind of controlling a little bit more where that puck is going to land. Can you control it perfectly? No, but you can control it a little bit. And so that is one of the key principles of RelationShift is it's not about making some massive drastic change that you can predict and you can have a perfect game plan and that you can map out from A to Z exactly how you're going to get there. But what it does mean is that you can lean in a particular direction. And when you lean in that direction, you're more likely to head in that direction. It's not a for sure thing and it's going to be unpredictable, but you can actually, if you could take that Plinko board and tilt it, you could have more control over where that puck goes. So that's one of the key principles of RelationShift. I want to give you two practical ways to apply RelationShift. The first is, and we're going to get into this in a little bit more detail, is that you want to lean into the relationships that are going to take you further and faster. So some relationships have the power to take you further and some have the power to take you faster and some don't. And where are they taking you? Well, it doesn't matter. It's whatever you want. So the idea is that you pick where you want to go. You want to be happier. You want to be richer. You want to write a book. You want to start a business. You want to have more customers. You want to have higher paying customers. Whatever your goal is, some relationships can help you achieve that faster and they can take you further on that journey than others. So we're going to talk about that more in a second. The second one that I want to share with you is, again, that we need to learn to allow those viruses or those ideas that are helping us in, and we need to learn to reject the ones that are holding us back. So those are two key ways that we can apply RelationShift. Before we move on, I want to show you, again, to reiterate, one of the key things to keep in mind about RelationShift is you make little adjustments and it can make a big difference over time. So my analogy here is that if you make a tiny course adjustment, I live here in Seattle, you can see the city behind me. Say I set sail out from the Puget Sound and I'm heading out into the ocean. I can adjust my rudder just a tiny little bit and it'll either take me to Australia or to Tokyo. And that's the power of small changes over time. And so if you think about it, if you meet someone and you get an idea from that person that changes your thinking just a little bit, what that has is a compounding effect, because that little change might cause you to meet somebody different who gives you a different idea, who causes you to meet another person who gives you another idea. And then over the course of time, your vision for what's possible in your life can completely be transformed. In fact, you could become a completely different person. Now you can look back. What's hard about this is you look back in time and you say, man, these relationships made a huge difference in my life. And I wouldn't have this job, or I wouldn't have this political view, or whatever it is. And you can look back. It's a lot more difficult looking forward, but it's important to remember how important those little changes are and how big of a difference that can make over time. So let's get into the first practical way to apply RelationShift. And that is that every relationship has the power to either take you towards a goal or pull you away from it. All relationships are affecting us in many different ways. And some people can be an incredibly positive influence in our life, but they can still have a certain thing, a certain aspect of their personality or the way that we interact with them that is negatively affecting us. So I'll give you an example. I have a friend whose mom I've come to really admire as a mentor. Wonderful woman. She's really funny. She's a hardworking person. She's successful. Everybody likes her. She's a really great woman. And there's a lot of ways that I look up to her, and I think she's a great mentor. But there's one way that I think that the way that she thinks about the life and the way that she approaches life actually is holding my friend back. And that is that she thinks that working like crazy all the time is really admirable, and maybe finding a little bit of ways to not work so hard, but work smarter and maybe work a little less. She thinks of that as kind of like not having good work ethic, right? And so because she has such a strong work ethic, I think to a fault, that rubs off on my friend. So then my friend is stressed and she's thinking like, man, I need to be working harder. I need to be doing more, even though her boss is telling her, hey, stop answering your emails over the weekend. You're already doing enough. And so this older woman, she's a great influence in so many ways, but because of the way she approaches her work, she actually causes some stress in my friend's life. And so how do you apply this is that you accept those positive things and you retain those and hold on to those. And you say, those are ways that I want this person to affect me positively. But you don't take the whole person and take all the negatives and the positives together. And you can separate out the negatives and you say, you know what, in this one area, I'm not going to allow this person to influence my thinking. And maybe in that area, I'm going to find someone else. Maybe there's somebody who really embodies that trait and they know how to work smart, not hard, and they know how to put their work away at the end of the day, and they get a ton of stuff done and they're really successful, but they're not so stressed about getting up at 5 a.m. and working till 9 p.m. and they don't think that that's the only way to be a good contributor to society. So that's what you do, is you find different people to pull you where you want, to go. And you have to kind of curate these traits from different people. They can't all come from the same person, because there's no one person who could embody all the different kinds of things in the different ways that we want to grow. So that's one of the keys to RelationShift is kind of thinking about how the relationships affect you positively and negatively. The second key is that this idea that some people can take us further and faster. And what I call this transformational gravity. So some people have more gravity. The moon, there was an eclipse the other night, which is really cool. I love to see that kind of thing in the sky. The moon has a certain amount of gravity, and that's gravity that pulls the ocean, creates the tides and all of that. If the moon was bigger, the tides would be more powerful, the waves would be bigger, right? So gravity pulls us towards it, and humans and people have that. Some people affect us more than others, and it can show itself in a lot of different ways. And so what I kind of like to think is like in any given trait in life. So one of those traits might be my financial status. There's where I am and there's where I want to be. Maybe there's a certain amount of money I want to have in my bank, or a certain amount of income I want to make. And there's mentors that are further along in this path. They have more money in their bank, or they have a higher income. And if I hang out with those people, and they can actually help pull me towards that goal of making a higher income. Now, maybe they're terrible parents, or they have a terrible relationship with their spouse. So I'm not going to think of them or let them pull me towards them in terms of the negative aspects of how they might be pulling me away from my goals. And by the way, let me stop and say, it's not always a moral judgment. It's not often a moral judgment. Sometimes it's just a personal thing. I want to be this, and this person isn't that. It's not moral. It's not necessarily immoral. It's just they're not on that path. They're not further along on that particular goal. Okay, so it doesn't have to be immoral or moral. But some people have the ability to take us much further. So if you think about that goal, here's an example where one mentor is a little further along than you, and another mentor is much further along than you. And that second mentor has more force or gravity to pull you forward. So let's say I want to start a business. I might have a friend who has who also wants to start a business and has already incorporated. They've already got like their first customer and they're starting to hire some employees. Let's consider that mentor one. That person could certainly help me and they can pull me forward. But let's say, for example, I could get Elon Musk to be my mentor. Now, Elon Musk has started many businesses. He's had a lot more success in business, and he would obviously have a lot more transformational gravity. And if I wanted to start a business and I could choose between two mentors, someone who's a little further ahead of me or Elon Musk, who would be the better person to spend my time with as a mentor for starting a business? Well, obviously Elon Musk. Getting to hang around with him a little bit would make a huge difference in, my life if I want to start a business or if I want to be successful in business. Now, maybe, again, he's not the greatest at some other aspect of his life, but you set that aside and you say, this is the part about you that I want to be transformed in. And so I want to have mentors that pull me forward as far and fast as possible. Now, with all goals, this isn't necessary. It's only necessary with certain goals. In my book, I get into some specific examples. And I'm also going to deal with some kind of common objections because some of this can start to feel kind of transactional and very robotic, like I'm thinking about who I'm hanging out with in order to get the most from my relationships. And the longer I've thought about this and the longer I've worked on it, the more I've realized that that's not true at all. The opposite's true. You still want to approach your relationships with as much authenticity as possible. And you really want to lean into your relationships in a way that's rewarding for both sides and isn't transactional in the slightest bit. But you can start to, again, lean in one direction or another. And as you lean towards someone that's more like an Elon Musk, who can help you grow much further and faster, they're going to help you with that goal of starting a business better. Now, maybe in another goal, it's not as big of a deal, like companionship. So if you want to have more friendship and companionship in your life, there's not really like an equivalent of an Elon Musk in that category. So maybe it's just you have some friends and family. I could think of this woman that I was mentioning, this older woman earlier. She's an example to me of someone who really loves her family and loves relationships. So she's a perfect mentor for me. And it's not so important in that category of my life to find someone who's like really far along. It's just think about the people in your life who are good at that thing. And at whatever that is, that's kind of what you want to hang out with them around. So there's also other kinds of common objections. I'm going to get to those at the end. So, and also by all means, if you have some questions, type them in and I'll get to as many as I can when we get to the end of this. But this is the idea of transformational gravity. Some people can help you go further faster. And one of the key principles of making the most of RelationShift is hanging around with people with more gravity in the areas of your life that you want to grow in. So now you may be asking, great, it'd be wonderful if I could have Elon Musk as a mentor for starting my new business. But how am I going to get Elon Musk to spend time with me? So I have some methods that I want to pass on to you for finding and fostering relationships with high gravity individuals. The first is to create bridge connections. I'm going to go into more of that in a second. And the second is to get into their tribe. So I'm going to get into both of these into a little bit greater depth. I have up here on the screen before we move on, the 7 dimensions of relationship strength. I can make this slide deck available to you after this if you don't want to take notes, or maybe you can take a screenshot. But these are 7 different ways that you can foster more strength of relationship with someone. Doing business together, time, trust, emotional connection, frequency, and quality of experiences. And you can see these here. I'll just say one thing real quick. A lot of people I talk to about relationships, they're afraid to ask people for something. They think that by asking for a help or a favor, they're going to burn a bridge with that person. But if you do it properly, in many cases, you actually are building a stronger relationship by asking for something. If you're asking for a favor, now, if all you ever do is ask for favors and you never have anything in return, obviously that could be a problem. But if you have a relationship with someone and you ask for something, you ask for a favor, it's a chance for you to do something together. It's a chance for them to help you out. And then maybe you can help them in return. And that is something that can build a longer lasting and more trusting relationship. So keep that in mind as you're building relationships with people. There's 7 dimensions that you can do that through. Now let's get into this idea of creating a bridge connection. A bridge connection is a really magical, powerful kind of connection between 2 different networks. And it's incredibly powerful because it doesn't have a lot of overlap. In my dissertation on this topic, one of the things I discovered was that we have a limited amount of time and energy to build relationships. And so it's important to build relationships with the right kinds of people, especially when we're talking about business, because we can't have a relationship with everyone. So bridge connection is a connection where you and this other person don't share a lot of the same connections. They know a lot of different kinds of people than you. And I know a lot of different kinds of people than them. And we're the common denominator. So rather than having to form a relationship with all of the people in their network, I can go through them and get access to anybody in their network. An example of this is if you want to do business with, say, high net worth individuals. Well, people that have, say, $50 million investments, they're typically pretty difficult to get a hold of. So who would be a kind of person that would have a lot of relationships with people with a lot of net worth? Well, financial advisor, CPA, attorney. There's certain people that have already built those relationships. So if you can form a strong relationship with the person at the center of that network, you've saved yourself a lot of work. That's the power of a bridge connection. And it's one of the most important ways that you can get more out of your networking is by finding the right kinds of people to really build those relationships with. And we call those power partners. Those of you who have been around networking for a long time are familiar with that term, but that's one of the key factors of relationship is that person can help take you further and faster. So that's a bridge connection. And the other idea that I want to talk about is getting into their tribe. And so, I thought I had this kind of was thinking about like, why is it that some people are so readily available to help us where most people aren't? I mean, if you're anything like me, you've probably asked for things from lots and lots of people over the time. You've applied to many jobs and, gotten no's, or you've asked for referrals and gotten no's, or, when I reached out to get an agent for my book, when I was first starting my writing career, I queried like 600 agents and not any of them wanted to work with me. So we're kind of used to people saying no to us more than they say yes. And I started to get interested in that idea. Like, why do people say no more than yes when you ask for help? Well, I realized it goes back to when we were first living in tribes of 50 to 100 people, 100,000 years ago. And the fact is that the people in our tribe, we relied on each other for mutual survival. If somebody was sick, everybody could get sick. If somebody couldn't go out and gather or hunt or wasn't pulling their weight or they needed something, the tribe, it was in their best interest to help each other. And so if you're in the tribe, it's very easy to get help. And in today's world, we have lots of modern versions of tribes. There's real tribes. There's, I was talking with some people in Kenya that were parts of tribes. So there's still geographic tribes, but I'm talking about in our brains 100,000 years ago when we were first becoming humans, we developed this concept that in today's world exists in other forms, like attending the same yoga class together, or going to the same gym, or attending the same church, or liking the same sports team. And we call capitalizing on this idea of being in someone's tribe, we use the word building rapport when we're talking about it in sales. And salespeople will sometimes come up to you and they'll see you got a Seahawks jersey on and they'll say, the Seahawks out, they're playing this Sunday, right? And so they bring something up that you might have in common in order to make you feel like you're in the same tribe. And what happens is your walls come down and you're more likely to make a purchase with this person because you trust them. Now, on the other hand, if somebody is outside your tribe, we're more likely to say no, because when our brains were forming, we said, that's a threat. we have limited resources. We can't share with just anybody who comes along. We're focused on our tribe survival. And so the human's natural response when asked for help is no to everybody who they perceive to be outside of their tribe. Now, is this a hard and fast rule? Of course not. There's lots more nuance to it, but it's one way to think about it. And if you can find a way to get into someone's tribe, then you have a much better chance of getting help from them. And I'm going to talk about 3 quick ways to do that. The first is by being helpful. So, I don't know if any of you guys know, I know Frank, Jeff Rogers. I learned this from him. When he goes out and meets with someone for the first time, he's only focused on helping that person. He wants to give them connections or referrals. He wants to learn about them. He doesn't try to get anything from them in return. And when you're helpful like that and you become known for being helpful, people want to help you in return. It's just the way the world works. You could call it karma. You could call it just the natural tendencies. You could call, you could name it anything you want. But when you're a very helpful person, when you give first, people just naturally want to give to you back. And so that's one way that you can get into your tribe. And it's one way that you can meet really interesting, high gravity people. So you could volunteer to be on a board of directors, and now you're in the tribe and you're sitting next to a group of people that are also on the board, and maybe they're more powerful people, or they have more influence, or they have something that you're looking for more of in your life. Another one is persistence. So simply persisting and taking the time. Relationship takes decades. It happens over the course of our entire life. Again, we can look back, and I can look at certain relationships that led to really amazing progress in my life. I couldn't really predict that going forward. So the key is you just keep persisting at it. And then over the course of time, you see how it evolves. The third is readiness. So what I found is it's really important when you meet someone or you get an opportunity and you recognize them as a high gravity individual, that you're ready to take advantage of that opportunity, because they come along when we don't expect it. And they come along, I think, for all of us. And so how I apply that is when I meet someone who's a high gravity individual and I have an opportunity to work with them or meet them or do something with them, I really put a lot of effort and thought into that relationship. If I'm doing work for them, I'm going to do twice as much work and bill them half as much, just so that I can make sure I really nail that engagement, because I want a relationship with that person more than I want a couple of bucks, or more than I want to skip out of work that afternoon. So readiness is having space in your life so that when that high gravity individual comes around, you're ready to pounce on that. So those are 3 ways that you can get into somebody's tribe if you identify them as somebody that you'd like to have more of in your life. So we're getting close to the end of my presentation, and I just want to address a couple of common objections that come up. One is people ask me, how is this different than social climbing? It sounds like you're using relationships to kind of improve your place in life. And frankly, really people who are doing that, they are using relationships to do that. But that doesn't mean that you need to. Again, relationship is happening to us all the time in all directions. And so what I would say is don't use it for social climbing. Use relationship as a tool to understand how people are affecting you. And again, lean towards the people that you want to be more like. Curate those traits. If you think about, when I stand up and give a toast at dinner, I know this guy who every time he gives toasts, everybody puts their plates down and and they listen to him, and he's a very dynamic speaker. And so when I give a toast, sometimes I kind of think of that guy in my mind and I channel him, and I think, there's just something about that. Like, you just kind of think of the person and how they would do it, and then you try it, and it becomes more natural and it becomes a part of your life, and then you get better at it. And so, yeah, you can use this to be, you can use these principles for nefarious or less than moral objectives, but you also don't have to. And again, it's happening to you whether you're controlling it or not. So what I would argue is lean in the direction you want to go, and lean into authentic and natural relationships, and keep investing in those relationships in the most authentic, giving way you can. And then you will watch and see how this progresses in your life and causes transformation for you in positive ways. The second objection I get is, how can I be intentional, without becoming too transactional, robotic, or unauthentic? And so some people are probably more in their heads than other people. Some people are more naturally relational. I had to approach this, and I used to be more of a, spreadsheet kind of guy. Like I actually, at one point, a long time ago, I had a spreadsheet with a list of my friends. Because again, I told you when we started out, I don't really understand naturally a lot of things like, how do you make friends? And so as I've grown older and as I've emulated people in my life who I see you portraying those traits in a really authentic way, I say, oh, that's how you be authentic. And so I have strived to become more authentic, not less. So what I would say is that it really comes down to, again, leaning into the direction that you want to go rather than saying, I'm going to completely cut this person out of my life. Now, I was talking to my personal trainer the other day, and he was like, no, some people are really negative and they bring me down, and I am not afraid to cut that friend out of my life. I have met many people, friends who have been in dating relationships, and the person they're dating is definitely bringing them down. And they keep going back to the person. They break up and then they go back to them. Man, there's times when you've got to cut somebody out of your life, but I wouldn't say that's being robotic necessarily. I would say that that's making a hard decision that only you can make. And I'll never tell you what to do in that situation. But sometimes you might need to look and say, I need to cut this person out. I think in most cases, you look and you say, I've got a bunch of great people in my life. I just want to think about what are my goals, and how can I align my goals, and how can I spend more time with certain people to get more of what I want and kind of move more in that direction. So those are two objections. I've reached the end of my presentation. I hope it's been informative for you, and I hope we have some questions to go over. And I'm ready to take your questions and answers. And by the way, I have a worksheet that I created. I'm going to see if I can end this screen share. And if you're interested, I'm actually just going to drop this into the chat if I can.
Great. That'd be super. If there's any problems with it, let me know. We'll distribute it afterwards to the attendees.
Yeah, it's not letting me drop it in, but go ahead and go ahead with any questions.
Yeah, please. And if you want to put them in chat, or you want to just say them out loud, that's all good. We've got just a minute or two left in our scheduled program. We might run just a hair late.
Yeah, first of all, I definitely would like to see that checklist and a copy of your PowerPoint. I know it's just about 5 o'clock, but we're going to keep going past 5. If you have to sign out, I totally understand that you might be on KP duty tonight, but Justin will be here to answer questions. Don't laugh, Thomas. He'll still be available to answer questions. So I won't take up any more of your time now. Questions for Justin?
And thank you, by the way. What we'll do is we'll email out the slides and the doc to everybody, because I think that's going to be best use of our time here.
Outstanding. Justin, thank you again for taking the time to do the research, write the book, and share your remarks and comments with us.
This is so much to think about. You gave us a huge amount of conceptual and actionable information in a very short period of time. It's incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia, you'd asked about culture as a filter. Do you mind elaborating on that? Maybe we have time for one question and then we can close.
Yeah, not a question, just a direction in which to lean to take your research further in case you're looking for your next steps. And that is, we've all observed those folks who do some of the things that you talk about in such a natural way, like the mom that you talked about being your mentor. We look at them and we say, wow, it would take me 100 years to do it that way, for example. And I just want to throw out that some of that is culturally based. And I don't just mean culture of countries, though it could be that too. Maybe the culture of the family you grew up in, you alluded to, maybe you had some catch up to do, for example. I've worked in educational institutions, other organizations, and I always think about taking the pulse of the culture of the organization and, just learning from it, because it's what eats strategy for lunch, as we know.
It is, yeah. Culture is relationship in action. I get into it a lot more in the book. This person that we brought up as an example comes from a Jewish immigrant family where family was everything, and they escaped persecution and all sorts. So yeah, it absolutely is a culture of their family. And then I'm lucky enough to get to witness it, and I don't have that. I don't have, I don't come from that. So I have to find other people to learn that from. Do we have time for Rachel's question?
Yeah, I'd like to take that time, please.
Sure, thank you. This is really fascinating and really enjoying listening to this. I know that you've spent a lot of time detailing how we can be, purposeful and thinking about our relationships with others and how others are influencing us. Is there a lens where we should be thinking about how we're influencing the people around us? And is there anything we should be mindful of to make sure that, we're not influencing people in the wrong way and trying to be as helpful to those around us as possible?
Mm-hmm. It's a cool question. Yeah, actually, some of the questions on the worksheet, I do get into that. It's interesting because our proteges also push us forward. And so it's important to be mindful. I actually break down 8 key relationships. Some of them are ahead of us, mentors. Some of them are beside us, our peers. Our peers actually affect us almost more than anybody else, and we're affecting them. And then we have people that that we all mentor in some way. And so it is important to be thinking about. I think it's a responsibility to think about. And also it's kind of a cool idea, because if you pick, certain kinds of proteges and you're investing in them, it actually is pushing you towards your goal as well. So I do absolutely think that you should be aware of that and how we are impacting other people. I'm trying to be quick here. John, do you want to wrap it up?
I'm actually going to ask that we wrap up, and we'll continue for another half hour. And I hope we'll continue this conversation, but I want to end a recording close to on time. And Chuck, if you'd wrap us up with a thank you as presiding officer.
Sure. Again, thanks everybody for being here this afternoon. Thank you, Rachel, especially for joining us from such a long distance. It was very, very helpful. And Justin also, just a wealth of information. This is so valuable. As usual, Thomas, you put together a very valuable program. Thank you.
As usual, I'll take credit for all the hard work everyone else did sourcing my speakers.
Right. So let's keep talking amongst ourselves. It's, my God, it's after 8 o'clock at night in DC. So, Rachel's probably getting ready to go to bed. But in any case, we can keep talking.
But for now, we end the recording, and thank you all for attending IMCnow, and we'll be back next month.